Hello everyone, Dr. G here again. Today's topic is intermittent fasting for women good or bad? As you know, intermittent fasting is reputed to have many supposed benefits. One of the big benefits is the possibility of weight loss. So, thanks to one of my patients, it was brought to my attention that it's possible that intermittent fasting has potentially different effects on men versus women, and especially on the menstrual cycle. As most of you know, intermittent fasting doesn't really tell you what to eat as much as when to eat it. And the idea that short-term fasting is healthy, for the most part, appears to be the case. But as with anything else in life, however, intermittent fasting is not good for everyone at all times, and women in particular at certain times, especially times in life like pregnancy or when stressed. The problem in the literature is twofold, as I see it. There really is no standardization as to what intermittent fasting regime they're studying. For example, most of the literature that I had a look at used the alternate day fasting as the benchmark. In other words, fasting every other day. But other intermittent fasting regimes exist, including the crescendo method, where you fast 12 to 16 hours a day, but just 2 to 3 days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. Or the 5 to 2 diet, which is fasting 2 days per week, restricting your calories to 25% of what your usual intake is. And the second qualifier is that most of the studies have been done on mice or rats. So many women have reported that certain types of intermittent fasting has apparently created sleeplessness or anxiety and irregular periods. There's also a physiological state that's called metabolic distress, which involves the activation of certain neurons in the hypothalamus. I think they're called hypocretin neurons. Doesn't matter. Anyway, when the body perceives that it's in a starved state. And it's well known that caloric restriction beyond a certain level is terrible for a woman's reproductive system. It can lead to hypothalamic amenorrhea or the shutdown of periods. And fat stores are very important in women to regulate the menstrual cycles. The fat is kind of a repository for certain of the hormones. This is why women tend to have more fat under the skin than men, and why men tend to not get cellulite and women do. So, since most of the research involves the alternate day regime in female rats, the results are clear. For female rats, the degree of change in their brain chemistry and in behavior was directly linked to the degree of caloric intake. In other words, brain chemistry and behavior was altered when caloric intake was down. So this kind of demonstrates the unique sensitivity, at least in female rats, to the starvation response. Interestingly, in that study, both the female and male rats gained small amounts of weight on the alternate day IF diet, and the male rats became more fertile while the female rats became infertile. For the female rats, even a 20% caloric restriction increased the proportion of the female animals displaying irregular cycling patterns. At 40% of caloric restriction, the majority of the female rats ceased to cycle at all. So if we extrapolate to human females, caloric restriction increases the likelihood of irregular periods, or actually the cessation of periods. So human studies have shown that alternate day fasting can create possible harmful metabolic effects in women. The alternative day fasting did not improve insulin sensitivity in women, but it did in men. The alternate day fasting had an unfavorable effect on gluten tolerance in non-obese women as compared to obese women. In other words, if you were non-obese or not obese, it created an unfavorable effect in these women. Overweight or obese women, however, appear to have some significant improvements using the alternative day fasting regimen, but normal weight women may not. For those of you who have seen a previous blog by me on intermittent fasting, I believe in the credo follow the light, because when it comes to humans, we're really only meant to eat between sunrise and sundown, and to rest after sundown to sunrise. And are dependent on artificial light devices, including our tablets and cell phones, disrupt our internal regulation. Intermittent fasting is kind of a way that you can follow these cycles. And intermittent fasting isn't caloric restriction as much as it is carbohydrate restriction. In other words, in order to lose weight, you have to burn off your carbohydrates first in order to flip the body into a ketotic mechanism or a fat burning mechanism. So if you restrict with the intermittent fasting your eating to 8 hours, it flips you into the fat burning mode. Now, this really isn't a problem as long as you're not getting all your nutrition from carbohydrates. Consuming carbohydrates, as I know, and probably you know, is far too easy. It's a problem because most of us are not used to getting our calories from good proteins, non-starchy vegetables, and fats. So I found some glitches because I do the intermittent fasting myself. And I've noticed that I must have accepted the notion that in order to lose weight, we have to stop eating. Because what I found is that even though I can eat normally during my 8-hour period, I found that I was eating less during that 8-hour period. So in many ways, I was maybe not entering fully the metabolic state that we talked about before, but I noticed that my energy level dropped, and I have to pay really a lot of attention to eating well during that 8-hour time period. When I do that, I don't particularly feel hungry afterwards, etc., and my energy's fine. Again, the idea is to force the body into ketosis by using up your glucose and enter into that caloric or ketotic state, so you without starving yourself, I guess what I'm trying to say. So in addition, certain individuals have trouble digesting and metabolizing fats. Not only do they have to learn to eat better eat better sources of good fats, they might have to take digestive enzymes to help digest the fats, and then they have to optimize the fatty acid metabolism if you want to lose weight by using certain supplements. Coenzyme Q10 is one of these supplements because studies have shown that people who are overweight tend to be deficient in coenzyme Q10. One book that I remember reading said up to 50% of individuals who are overweight are low in CoQ10. The other thing that I found personally is that stress kills the effect of intermittent fasting, and I think it's because stress increases cortisol. Cortisol releases glucose from the liver into the blood. More glucose in the blood releases insulin, and more insulin, when it's high, takes any excess carbohydrates that we have and puts it into fat storage. So for intermittent fasting regimes to work, stress levels must be controlled, and this is especially true for women. So in summary then, if we want to put it together in a little different way, women are different than men in their reactions to intermittent fasting. Obese women may benefit from intermittent fasting more than non-obese women. Women should not use the alternate day intermittent fasting regime or any intermittent fasting regime that involves fasting for 24 hours. If you're a female, do not caloric restrict more than 10% of your total calories. Female bodies are extremely sensitive to caloric restriction. Make sure that you have an adequate caloric intake during the non-fasting times, and if possible, substitute good fats for carbohydrates to a large extent if you're attempting to lose weight with some of the restrictions that we mentioned before or qualifiers. And just as a note, if you're going to cheat ketogenically. In other words, use the ketogenic diet to maintain that carbohydrate restriction. If you're going to eat beyond the 8 hours, see if you can do it ketogenically, like eating proteins and good fats. And for heaven's sakes, if you're pregnant or planning to be, or breastfeeding, or you have any medical condition involving disruptions of glucose, like hypoglycemia, or in fat metabolism, or have an eating disorder, or sleep problems, or are chronically stressed, please discuss your situation with your healthcare provider before starting any fasting regimen of any type. And as always, if you'd like to be notified of future videos, if you found this information useful and would like a little bit more of it, please press the subscribe button below. And they keep telling me there's a bell to press there too if you want to press the bell. Anyway, this is Dr. G saying make your day an exceptional one because no one else can do it for you.